You think you're awake, but who is it that knows that? Is it the same you that breathes without thinking, blinks without remembering, and feels without understanding why? Or is it something deeper, more silent, more distant? You sit in your room, the light from your screen dancing softly on your face. You feel tired, but your mind is still wandering gently, quietly, like it always does at night. Thoughts drift in, some familiar, some strange. A memory from this morning, a doubt that's been living in your spine, a question you never quite asked out loud, and underneath it all, something watches, something listens. You felt it before, haven't you? That quiet observer behind your eyes, the one that doesn't speak but sees, the one that doesn't sleep even when you do. Tonight we're going to sit with that part of you, the one who is aware of being aware, the part that doesn't scream for attention, but never quite disappears. Maybe it's the soul, maybe it's the brain playing tricks, maybe it's just you stripped of all stories and names and memories. Consciousness, the most familiar and yet most mysterious thing in your life. You use it to navigate everything, but you rarely look at it directly. What is it made of? Where does it go when you're unconscious? And most of all, why is something here instead of nothing? If that question touches something in you, like, subscribe, stay, this space is for you. And before we begin, I want to ask gently, what thought keeps you up at night? Just one. Let it float to the surface. We won't chase it. We'll just observe it. From here, from the place behind the place, from the part of you that is listening now, even as your body begins to fall still. Let's begin. You've done this before. Caught yourself staring at your own reflection, not checking your hair, not adjusting your clothes, but just looking. Something about that moment holds you still. Your eyes meet your own, and suddenly it's not a mirror. It's a portal, a window where the glass doesn't show your face so much as it reveals the fact that someone is looking. And in that pause, you notice the strangeness. You're the one seeing, but you're also the one being seen. How can both be true? The observer and the observed in one body. A paradox you live with every day. Like when you say, I'm thinking. Who is the I and what is doing the thinking? And who is noticing that the thought is happening at all? You can observe your own thinking. You can catch yourself in emotion. You can feel a memory arise like a cloud and decide whether or not to believe it. But what is this part of you that's watching everything else? You never really see it. You only see what it sees, like a mirror that can't reflect itself. And that's where it begins, the mystery of consciousness. Not as a concept in a textbook, but as a living, breathing awareness that seems to sit just behind your forehead, or maybe in your chest, or maybe outside of you entirely. Try to catch it, and it slips. Try to define it, and it expands. It's not a thing you can hold. It's a light that makes holding possible. There are moments in your life that shake you into noticing this awareness, a near accident, a dream that felt more real than waking, or maybe something quieter, like hearing your name spoken unexpectedly. That tiny jolt that reminds you you're not just here. You're here, present, awake. But who is the you that wakes up? This is not about metaphysics or religion or even psychology, not yet. This is about the fact that you know you exist, and that knowing knows itself. It's recursive, like standing between two mirrors, your reflection looping infinitely in both directions. There is no end to the layers of self-recognition, no bottom to the question, who am I? Because with every answer, someone inside you steps back and asks again. But who is asking? Maybe this is why you've always been drawn to late-night thoughts. Maybe this is why silence can feel both peaceful and terrifying. In the silence, there's nothing to distract you from this awareness. No social role to perform, no task to complete, just you watching yourself be. Some philosophies say that consciousness is the final reality, the one thing you can't doubt. I think, therefore I am. But even Descartes didn't finish the loop. Because who is it that notices the thinking? That's what pulls you deeper. You are not just aware. You're aware of being aware. And that second layer, that subtle doubling, it's what makes consciousness so impossible to fully explain. You can break down the brain, measure neurons, scan activity, and still no one can point to the exact place where awareness begins. It's not a button you can press. It's not a light that turns on. It's more like a mirror that never stops reflecting. Sometimes it shows you joy, sometimes pain, sometimes numbness. But no matter what appears in it, the mirror remains. And the more you notice this, the more distant the self begins to feel. Not in a detached way, but in a freeing one. You realize your thoughts are not you. Your feelings are not you. Your roles, your fears, even your name, not you. You are the one watching all of it pass by, like clouds across a vast sky, and the sky is never touched by the storm. So let's return to that soft question: who is watching you think right now? Not in a paranoid way, not as if there's something external observing you, but from within. That gentle sense that something is awake in you, quietly witnessing each moment. Try not to answer too fast. Let the question hang in the stillness. Let it stretch your inner world a little wider, because sometimes the questions we don't answer are the ones that lead us home. And here's the symbol that lingers: a mirror in a candlelit room. The flame flickers, but the reflection remains. The shadows shift, but the glass is still. You lean closer not to see your face, but to meet your gaze. And just for a moment, you wonder if it's looking back. There's a version of you that walks through the world like it knows exactly who it is. It has a name, a story, a set of likes and dislikes, and a personal brand of reactions to joy and pain. This self is what people see. It smiles when it's supposed to. It knows how to say "I'm fine," even when it's not. It adapts to the room, adjusts to the tone, and survives each day by pretending it's the whole truth. But late at night, when the roles fall away, when no one is watching, that self feels like a costume, a mask that once served you but now clings too tight. You can't fully take it off, but you know it's not you. Still, the pain it feels is real. The ego is clever like that. It builds an identity not out of truth, but out of necessity. According to Adler, we form our core patterns early, not based on who we are, but on what we needed to be in order to belong. If being the quiet one earned you safety, you kept it. If being the achiever made you lovable, you wore it like armor. These aren't flaws. They're defense mechanisms. And for a time, they work. They keep the inner child protected. But over time, the mask begins to ache, because it's rigid, and you are not. There comes a moment, usually during suffering, when you realize you're protecting an illusion. You're defending a version of yourself that no longer fits. You catch yourself reacting to a small comment as if it were a threat. You hear a tone in someone's voice and feel shame swell up like a bruise that never healed. But if you pause, really pause, you notice something strange. The pain belongs to the mask. The deeper you watch as quietly, like a parent watching a child throw a tantrum, not with judgment, just with knowing. So here's the paradox: the self you protect isn't you, but the pain it feels is real. And in trying to defend that self, you end up hurting more. You identify with the shame. You over-explain your choices. You spiral into memories trying to prove you're right, or worthy, or good. But underneath all of that, someone is watching. The silent witness again. The one who doesn't need defending. The one who was never wounded in the way your story claims. Not because it doesn't care, but because it's beyond that layer entirely. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social self we build for survival. It's not bad. It's not a lie. It's just not the whole picture. And the more we over-identify with it, the more fragile we become. Every criticism feels like death. Every mistake feels like erasure, because we think we are the mask. But when you loosen that grip, when you say this pain is here but it's not who I am, something shifts. You begin to sense the space between the mask and the witness. And in that space, there's breath, relief, compassion. But it's not easy, because we're taught to believe the mask is our truth. Social media rewards it. Careers are built on it. Relationships orbit around the performance. And so we become scared to peel it back, afraid of what's underneath. Will anyone love what they see? Will you love what you find? The fear is real, but so is the freedom on the other side. Sometimes it begins with a small rebellion. You say no when you normally say yes. You cry in front of someone you trust. You sit in silence instead of explaining. These moments don't feel like victories. They feel like falling apart. But falling apart is often how the false self begins to dissolve. And in its place, something softer emerges. Something truer. Not perfect. Not polished. But whole. So let's pause with a soft question. What part of you are you still defending? Even though it hurts you to do so, let it rise gently. There's no need to fix it. Just notice. Because awareness without judgment is the first step toward integration. And here's the image that stays with you, a cracked porcelain mask resting on a velvet cloth. Light from a window touches the broken edge. Behind the mask, a soft face not hidden, not defined, just present, breathing, watching. Finally, free to be seen. There's a moment in early childhood that most of us forget, but it shapes everything that follows. It's the first time you use the word I and understand that it means you. Not your parents, not your toys, not the world around you, but the internal presence watching from behind your eyes. Before that, you existed, but you didn't yet know you existed. You responded to hunger, light, sound, and touch, but there was no language separating you from your surroundings. No filter of identity, no narrative, just sensation, just being. And then one day the word I appears, and with it the illusion of separation begins. Can you remember the first time you realized you were a person? Most of us can't. But the effects are everywhere. You learn that I wants, I needs, I did something wrong, I should be better. That single syllable becomes the center of your story, and everything you experience from then on gets filtered through its lens. I am good, I am bad, I am smart, I am too much. Each phrase another thread in the tapestry of self. But woven into that story is a deeper question you rarely pause to ask. Who taught you who you are? Alfred Adler believed we are not shaped by our past directly, but by the interpretation of our early experiences. That means the version of you that was born in childhood wasn't a discovery, it was a construction, a reaction to your environment. Maybe you learned that being quiet kept the peace. Maybe you learned that achieving brought affection. Or maybe no matter what you did, someone made you feel like you were too much or not enough. And so that began to twist itself into shapes that fit. And you called that shape me. But the inner child remains underneath it all. The pre-verbal self. The one that knew how to feel fully without needing to explain or justify it. The one that didn't think about being enough because it didn't yet know the word enough. And sometimes in moments of stillness, you can feel it. That child hasn't disappeared. It waits patiently, quietly in the corners of your awareness. In the way you flinch when someone raises their voice. In the way you crave approval from people who remind you of your parents. In the way your heart softens when you see someone else cry. That's the child whispering, I remember. So here's the paradox. You had to form a sense of self in order to survive. But in doing so, you lost touch with the part of you that simply was. And now, as an adult, The journey inward is not about becoming something new. It's about returning, peeling away the layers of I'm supposed to and I was told to be until you find the presence beneath the persona, the self that existed before you had a name, the one that doesn't need to prove anything, the one that's still there quietly breathing beneath all the noise. Gabor Mate often speaks of trauma as the loss of authenticity in order to maintain attachment. That's what happens in childhood when your true feelings are not welcomed. You hide them. You learn what version of yourself is acceptable and suppress the rest. But the cost of that suppression is disconnection from others and from yourself. And healing, real healing, is not about fixing something broken. It's about creating space for what was once exiled to return. Not with force, not with judgment, but with presence. So let's ask what parts of your childhood self are still waiting to be invited back in. Maybe the playful one, the loud one, the sensitive one. Maybe the one who used to dream before the world told them to be realistic. You don't have to become that child again, but you can make room for them. You can sit beside them. You can listen without correcting. And the symbol that lingers here is a forgotten swing in a quiet backyard. The chains rusted the seat still, but the wind still moves it, gently, as if memory itself is reaching out, not to pull you back, but to remind you that you never truly left. There's a voice that never stops speaking. It narrates your life as if it were a documentary. It comments on what you're doing, what you should be doing, what you forgot to do, and what you might never get right. Sometimes it sounds like your parents. Sometimes it echoes an old teacher or a childhood friend. Sometimes it mocks. Sometimes it worries. But one thing remains true: it talks, constantly. And most of the time you mistake it for yourself. You call it thinking, but it's more like an internal monologue that never got the memo to be quiet. It plans, replays, judges, compares, imagines, and corrects. And it does all of this as if your entire identity depends on what it says. You hear it and assume, this must be me. But pause for a moment. Can you notice something strange? If you can hear the voice, who's doing the listening? This is the beginning of a quiet unraveling. The realization that there are at least two layers inside of you, the speaker and the one who hears. Most of us live fused with the voice, letting it dictate our self-worth, our confidence, our worldview. But once you create a little space, once you begin to notice the voice, instead of being the voice, something profound happens. You stop believing every word it says. Carl Jung often spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown, deny, or fear. The voice in your head is often shaped by the shadow. It echoes unhealed wounds. It mimics the people we needed love from but couldn't please. And it tries to keep you safe by anticipating judgment or rejection before it even happens. But safety through control is a lonely kind of protection. It walls you off from others and from your own spontaneity. You've heard the voice say things like, "You're not good enough. Why would they care what you think? You always mess this up." And even if you know intellectually that it's just an echo, it still hurts because part of you still believes it. And that's where the inner child comes in again. That voice is often protecting something younger, a version of you who experienced shame or confusion or fear and never got to speak back. Now the adult you lets that voice take over, thinking it's being wise when really it's just being scared. But here's the paradox: you can't silence the voice by fighting it. That only gives it more power. What you can do is notice it, witness it, let it speak, and then decide whether or not to believe it. Because the one who hears the voice is not bound by the voice. The listener is free. This inner shift doesn't happen all at once. It's not a revelation, it's a practice, a slow return to the space between the words, the part of you that doesn't need to narrate, the part that simply is, that awareness. That's the real you, not the voice, not the story, not the thought, the one who watches the thought appear, hang in the air, and dissolve. That still point behind the eyes, that breath between sentences. Imagine sitting in a room with someone who won't stop talking. They ramble, they worry, they repeat themselves. At first you try to argue, then you try to comfort. Eventually you realize the best thing to do is just listen, without reacting, without agreeing, just witnessing their noise without becoming it. That's what it feels like to observe your thoughts from a place of inner stillness. So let's ask, what does the voice in your head say most often? And more importantly, who taught it to speak that way? Let the answer come without force. Maybe the voice isn't even yours. Maybe it never was. Maybe you've just been carrying it for so long that it started to sound familiar. And here's the image that stays a quiet room with 2 chairs. One chair is occupied by a person who won't stop talking. The other is empty but facing the speaker. You walk into the room, pause, and choose to sit in the empty chair. Not to respond, not to agree, just to be there. A silent presence, a witness. And for the first time, the voice begins to lose its grip. Every night, without effort, you slip into a world you didn't design, yet it feels strangely familiar. In this world, logic dissolves, time folds people from different years, appear in the same room, and gravity sometimes forgets its job. You wake up breathless from a chase that never happened. Or you cry over a face you haven't seen in years. Or you laugh with someone who doesn't exist. And somehow all of it feels deeply personal, intimate, as if a part of you was trying to say something, but through symbols, through scenes, through silence. Dreams are the language of the unconscious. They carry messages your waking mind can't yet process. And what's most mysterious, you create these dreams, but you don't control them. So the question lingers, who's writing the script? It's one of the strangest truths of consciousness. There is a part of you that continues to experience while you are asleep. And this part, this quiet dreamer, is wise, archetypal, playful, sometimes terrifying. Carl Jung believed dreams are direct expressions of the unconscious, filled with characters and images that represent aspects of your psyche. The mother, the shadow, the trickster, the child. When you dream, these symbols rise from below the surface, acting out dramas you didn't consciously ask for yet somehow need to witness. A door you never open in waking life swings wide in a dream. A version of you you've hidden appears and speaks plainly. And always, always, something is watching it all unfold. The awareness never fully disappears. Even in the deepest sleep, something in you observes. That's what makes dreaming so strange. You are both actor and audience. The dream seems to come from inside you, but you don't get to choose its plot. Sometimes it's a replay of the day. Other times, it's a surreal parable with no clear meaning. And yet when you wake, it often feels like truth, as if some part of you knew something your waking mind refused to admit. Think about those dreams that stay with you. The one where you're falling. The one where someone you love dies. The one where you're running, but your legs won't move. These aren't just random firings of the brain. They're messages encoded in emotion and symbol. They point to things unresolved, hidden, or deeply desired. The falling might reflect a loss of control. The paralysis could reveal where you feel stuck. The presence of someone long gone might mean your heart hasn't finished saying goodbye. But again, the paradox. You are the dreamer, yes, but you are also being shown the dream. And in that relationship, something sacred emerges. You begin to realize that awareness doesn't sleep. Consciousness bends, shape shifts, observes itself, but never vanishes. It simply changes costumes. Gabor Mate once said that trauma speaks in symptoms when it has no words. And dreams are often where those symptoms whisper loudest, not to scare you, but to help you remember. Remember the part of yourself you've buried, the instinct you've ignored, the grief you've postponed, the need you once silenced. Dreams don't lie. They may confuse, but they never lie. So what does that say about the nature of consciousness? that even when you are unconscious by medical definition, your inner world continues, unsupervised, unedited, real. And if you've ever had a lucid dream, those rare moments when you realize I'm dreaming and begin to influence the dream, you know how quickly that realization can shift everything. The dream becomes a playground, a mirror, a conversation. But still, even then, a deeper mystery remains. What part of you became aware in that moment? And where was it before? So here's the question to rest with tonight. What is the dream trying to show you that your waking self has avoided, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a whisper to listen for? Maybe the dream doesn't want to be interpreted. Maybe it only wants to be felt. And the image that lingers a hallway with countless doors, dimly lit by a moon that doesn't belong to any sky. You walk barefoot. Each door holds a memory, a fear, a hope. One door opens on its own. Inside, your younger self stands silent but unafraid. They look at you and smile, not with recognition, but with relief. You've arrived. There's a child inside you who never really grew up, not in the way people think. This child doesn't care about resumes or bills or how many unread messages sit on your phone. They don't understand why you stay quiet when something hurts or why you say yes when your body says no. They only know how to feel, fully, instinctively, loudly. And that child, tender, wild, wounded, still lives at the core of your being. You don't always hear them clearly, but you feel them. When your heart clenches unexpectedly, when tears rise, and you don't know why, when joy bubbles up in the middle of a mundane moment. That's the child speaking in sensation. And someone else hears them, the one who watches, the inner witness, the quiet presence that notices all of it without trying to fix or flee, the observer who sees both the adult and the child within. Most of us live caught between these two forces. The inner child who longs to feel freely, and the adult self who believes it must be composed, rational, responsible. The child panics. The adult suppresses. The child reaches for love. The adult fears rejection. The child wants to dance. The adult asks, what will they think? And somewhere in the background, the witness breathes. Carl Jung described the psyche as a constellation of selves, not a singular ego, but a shifting field of inner figures, the child, the parent, the judge, the rebel, the artist, and perhaps the most essential one, the witness, the part of you that doesn't play a role, doesn't argue or explain. It simply sees. And this is where healing begins. Not by silencing the child, not by overpowering them with adult logic, but by letting the witness sit beside the child, without shame, without rush. Try this now. Imagine the last time you felt small, afraid, overwhelmed, unworthy. Picture the scene. Where were you? Who was there? What did your body feel like? Now soften your gaze and picture a child version of you in that moment. Not metaphorically, literally. 5 years old, maybe younger. They look up at you, eyes wide. And you, the you, listening now, you don't scold. You don't fix. You kneel. You hold their hand. You say, I see you. That's all. That's the beginning of reintegration. The paradox here is that your child self never stopped needing what they needed. They just learned to bury the need. And the adult self never stopped feeling responsible for keeping everything in order, even if it means emotional starvation. But the witness knows neither is the whole truth. The witness isn't afraid of emotion. It doesn't categorize feelings as good or bad. It understands that sadness is a wave, not a failure. That anger is often a shield for grief. That joy can arrive uninvited, and that's okay. Gabor Mate reminds us that wholeness is not about eliminating parts of the self, it's about reconnecting them. The child brings feeling. The adult brings structure. The witness brings presence. When they move together, something beautiful unfolds. You don't have to collapse into emotion. You don't have to armor up against it either. You can hold it, like you would hold a child, gently, openly, without rushing it to be okay. So here's the question to sit with. What does your inner child want to say that you haven't let them say out loud, not because you don't care, but because you didn't know how to listen? And here's the symbol that lingers: a small child sitting cross-legged in the center of a quiet room, a single beam of sunlight falling across their lap. They look down, drawing circles on the floor with one finger. You sit beside them, not to teach, not to lead, just to be there, side by side, breath by breath, until their hand rests gently in yours, and you both remember no part of you has ever truly been alone. You spend years building something you think is solid, a version of you that fits into conversations, expectations, careers, relationships. You tell people who you are. I'm the funny one. I'm the quiet one. I'm ambitious. I'm damaged but strong. And you wear these phrases like armor, like anchors. But at some point, quietly, you begin to wonder, who decided this was me? You start to feel the weight of these labels, not because they're false, but because they're incomplete. And suddenly, what once felt like identity starts to feel like a trap. The paradox is subtle, but sharp. We need identity to navigate the world. To say I am is to feel real. But the moment we over-identify, the I becomes rigid, fixed, small, a script instead of a self. We repeat certain stories so often they begin to define us. I've always been anxious. I can't handle confrontation. People always leave. And each time we say these things, we reinforce the mask. The boundaries tighten, the roles calcify, and the truer, softer self underneath is left waiting, unseen. Alfred Adler would say that identity isn't built on facts, but on interpretations of experience. You were not born shy or loud or insecure or tough. You became that way to survive, to belong, to be loved. The identity formed around a purpose, protection, approval, control. But now that same structure becomes a cage. You're no longer the child who needed to act a certain way to feel safe. But the habit remains. You still say yes when you mean no. Still try to make people laugh when you're hurting. Still push yourself to prove you're worthy, even when no one is asking. And the thing is, most people never question it, because the world rewards consistency, predictability. You get praise for knowing who you are, for sticking to your brand, for not changing your mind. But growth isn't tidy. It contradicts itself. It says, I was this and now I'm not. I used to want that and now I don't. I thought I knew, but now I'm not sure. That kind of honesty threatens the identity. And so we hide again, not from others, but from ourselves. Yet awareness always waits, watching, noticing the little cracks in the mask, the moment you laugh too hard for your serious persona, the tears that slip out even though you're the strong one, the anger that rises in the middle of being nice. These are not failures, they're invitations, signs that the old self is ready to soften, to evolve, to include more of who you actually are. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, not becoming someone new, but integrating the parts you've rejected, the shy part, the jealous part, the joyful part, the part that doesn't know what it wants. They're all still you. And when you stop pushing them away, identity becomes less of a trap and more of a river, flowing, changing, alive. Let's slow down here. Can you name one story you tell about yourself that no longer feels true, but you keep telling it anyway? Maybe it's because people expect it. Maybe it's how you get love. Maybe it's just familiar. Whatever it is, notice it, gently. You don't have to let it go yet. Just recognize that it's not the whole of you. It never was. And here's the symbol that stays with you: an empty theater rows of velvet chairs bathed in golden light. On stage, a costume hangs alone, carefully sewn, beautifully detailed, but still. The spotlight fades, and in the darkness behind the curtain, someone steps out, not to perform, not to impress, just to breathe, to exist, without a script. There's a part of you that never turns off. It watches even when your body is limp with exhaustion, when your thoughts scatter like dust in the dark. It lingers through anesthesia, through fainting, through trance and dream. It doesn't speak. It doesn't move. It just waits. There are stories, strange, unexplainable, of people under deep sedation, hearing everything said in the room. Of those in comas knowing who visited. Of awareness peeking through the thinnest veil as if refusing to vanish. What is this part of you that cannot sleep? You think of sleep as the shutting down of consciousness, but that's not quite true. Consciousness changes form. The thinking mind may drift, the ego may dissolve, but something in you remains present. A dream drifts across your awareness. A sound startles you awake. A fragment of fear whispers before dawn. Even in the deepest sleep, something receives. Not actively, not deliberately, but like an ear beneath the ocean, always listening. There's a quiet paradox here. The body sleeps, the mind rests, but awareness remains. It may dim, it may hide, but it never disappears. Like the moon behind clouds, it doesn't stop being there just because you can't see it. That raises a question few people ask. Is awareness something you generate or something you receive? Modern neuroscience tries to pin this mystery down. It studies the brain's default mode network, the moments when attention turns inward. But even with every scan and measurement, it hasn't found the source of consciousness, only its echoes. Gabor Mate often says, the mind is not in the brain the way music is not in the radio. That line lingers. You hear it and wonder if the brain is a receiver, not a generator, then what's broadcasting through you? And if something in you remains aware when everything else fades, then maybe you are more than your thinking. Maybe you are not the thoughts, but the sky they drift across. Not the sensations, but the stillness that feels them. This doesn't mean abandoning your human self. It means expanding it. Making room for the part of you that doesn't panic, doesn't crave, doesn't perform. The part that simply is. Think about those moments before waking, when you're not quite asleep, not fully awake. The world feels thin, soft, undefined. Time doesn't exist there. Identity blurs. And yet something watches. Something knows. That liminal awareness, neither here nor there, might be closer to your essence than anything you experience during the day. Children often sense this intuitively. Before the world teaches them how to be, they live closer to that raw awareness. They stare at lights, at trees, at strangers' faces, not to judge or compare, but simply to see. They haven't yet forgotten that seeing in itself is enough. So here's the quiet question. When everything else falls away, when there are no tasks, no names, no thoughts, what part of you is still present? And even more gently, has it always been there? Picture this: a candle burning in an empty room, untouched by wind, unwavering. Outside, the world spins, sleeps, collapses, rebuilds. But the candle stays lit, not because it's protected, but because it is the source. That's what this awareness feels like. Not something you control, not something you need to chase, but something that simply is, waiting, watching, like a soul that never learned how to stop existing. And here's the image that stays: a vast field at midnight, stars scattered like whispers overhead. In the center, a figure lies, still, eyes closed, body calm. Yet above their chest, a small orb of light hovers, steady, silent, glowing. It doesn't move. It doesn't fade. It just watches, as if it always has. We like to imagine that consciousness is something we create, a spark inside our brain flickering to life like a flame. We say we light up with awareness. We speak of insight as illumination. And in a way, it comforts us to think that the self is a kind of inner fire, something bright and uniquely ours. But what if it's not a flame at all? What if it's a mirror? A mirror doesn't generate light, it reflects it. It takes in what's there and offers it back clear and silent. It doesn't hold on. It doesn't judge. It simply reveals. That's what real awareness feels like when you begin to notice it. Something reflective, not active. Something that allows instead of directs. You look into it and it shows you what is without distortion. Not the story, not the memory. Just the raw experience as it passes. This is a different kind of consciousness than we're taught to value. Most of us grow up believing we are our thoughts, that if we can think something, analyze it, fix it, we're in control. We treat the mind like a forge, burning, bending, creating meaning. But no thought ever truly captured you. The real you isn't inside the thought. It's the space in which the thought appears. Jung believed that consciousness is the meeting point of the outer world and the inner self. It's the reflective surface where instinct and reality touch. And that surface isn't something you own, it's something you are. You're not holding the mirror. You are the mirror. And everything that passes, joy, pain, memory, judgment, desire, it all moves across your surface like clouds over still water. But here's where the paradox lives. When the mirror becomes dirty, you start to think the smudges are you. You identify with the shame, the fear, the projections. You forget that they're just marks on the surface. You forget that they can be wiped clean. And you forget that underneath all of it, you're still whole, still reflective, still able to receive. Think about how a mirror behaves. It doesn't hold on to the last thing it reflected. It doesn't cling to images of the past. It doesn't resist the next light coming toward it. It just stays, present, empty yet full, quiet yet awake. That's what deep awareness feels like. Not dramatic, not chaotic, but still, undeniable, alive. This idea can be unsettling. If consciousness doesn't come from you, then where does it come from? Are you just a window for something larger to look through? Are you not the one behind the eyes, but the eyes themselves? These aren't questions to answer. They're questions to live with. Because sometimes the answers aren't words. They're states. They're the moments you lose yourself in music, in awe, in grief, when the sense of I fades and something else, something vast, takes over. And this is where it gets cosmic. What if consciousness isn't personal? What if it doesn't belong to you but moves through you like sunlight through a prism? What if your mind isn't a generator but a lens? Then your thoughts aren't commands, they're weather. Then your emotions aren't definitions, they're waves. Then your identity isn't fixed. It's a costume worn by the mirror for a little while. Let's ask softly, what have you mistaken for who you are? When it might just be something passing across your surface. A belief, a wound, a title, a mistake. Can you see it now as a reflection, not a root? And the image that stays is this: a vast silent lake just before sunrise. The sky begins to change color, but the water doesn't ripple. Not yet. It holds the entire sky in stillness. And for a moment, you can't tell where the world ends and the reflection begins. Because they are one. Because you are both. There are people who have watched themselves die and returned. Not in metaphor, but in those strange, fragile moments we call near-death experiences. Their hearts stop. The machines go still. And yet, something continues. They describe it like floating above their bodies, watching doctors work, hearing conversations they couldn't have heard, seeing things no eyes could see. Not dreaming, not hallucinating, witnessing. As if the awareness didn't vanish, it simply stepped aside, waited, watched. You don't need to believe these stories to feel their weight, because the real question isn't about what happens after death. It's about what happens at the edge of it. What part of you remains when everything else lets go? When people speak of dying, many don't talk about fear. They talk about clarity. The mind quiets, the body dissolves, and in that soft emptiness, something still knows. Not as a thought, not as a voice, but as presence. Gabor Mate once wrote about people reconnecting with their truest selves in the face of terminal illness. Not because of death, but because all the distractions fall away. When there's nothing left to protect, the witness steps forward, unafraid, unadorned. This brings us to the paradox of death, not as an end, but as a mirror. You fear it because you fear the loss of identity, the collapse of everything you've known as you. But the deeper truth is, awareness doesn't cling to form. It only watches. It doesn't resist the unraveling. It allows. That doesn't mean there's no pain, but pain isn't proof of identity. It's just another ripple on the surface. Carl Jung believed that the psyche prepares for death throughout life, that dreams shift as we age, that symbols become less about external struggle and more about return. Water, light, doors, the shedding of skin. These symbols appear again and again, whispering you are not just the body, you are not just the name. You've seen it, haven't you, in the eyes of someone near the end? A calm that doesn't make sense, a peace that has nothing to do with winning or fixing, just a soft letting go. And still, even as the body fades, you feel that presence. You can sit in the room with them and feel it, as if something sacred hovers, wordless, weightless, still aware. The mystery is this: if consciousness were purely biological, how does it witness its own failing? How does it see from outside what science says is no longer alive? Maybe there's something more. Or maybe we've misunderstood what it means to be conscious all along. Let's ask without urgency what would remain of you. If your thoughts stopped, your name vanished, and your story dissolved not as a loss, but as a return. And imagine this: a cocoon, soft and silent on the edge of a tree branch at dusk. Inside, something stirs, not dying, but transforming. And just before the skin splits open, there's a moment of stillness, of not knowing, of being held in between. That's where the witness waits, in the breath between what ends and what begins. Close your eyes. Picture a red apple resting on a wooden table. You can see it, can't you? The curve of its shape, the way the light glints across its skin. Maybe there's even a shadow, soft and gray, underneath it. Now pause. You're seeing, but your eyes are closed. You're perceiving, but there's no light. What part of you is doing the seeing? This is the quiet magic of the mind's eye, a vision not born from the retina, but from something more elusive. Imagination, memory, awareness itself. Whatever it is, it exists beyond the limits of biology. People born without sight still report visual dreams. People who lose their sight can still see in symbols, in patterns, in flashes of internal light. The brain's eye closes, but the mind's eye remains open. It's easy to think of sight as purely physical. Light enters, a signal travels, a picture forms, but not all images are built from photons. Some are built from knowing, from feeling, from some deep, quiet corner of awareness that never needed permission to create. The philosopher Daniel Dennett once asked, "Where is the screen on which the mind's cinema plays?" And the unsettling answer is, there isn't one. The movie happens in a space that cannot be found, yet we all experience it. Here lies the paradox. Your inner vision can feel more real than the world around you. A memory can trigger emotion more intense than what's happening right in front of you. A daydream can bend time, letting you live hours in a blink. But you can't locate where it happens. You can't point to the part of the brain where an imagined sunset lives. And yet, you know it when you see it. Carl Jung understood this well. He spoke often of active imagination, the process of entering dialogue with images from the unconscious, not just picturing, but interacting, as if the images had their own life, their own voice. He believed the psyche speaks in symbols, and those symbols arise not from logic, but from deep awareness. When you dream, when you visualize, when you remember, something behind your thoughts is painting the scene. Not you exactly, but something through you. And what's more curious sometimes, the mind's eye sees what the physical eye missed. You walk away from a conversation and suddenly remember the way someone's fingers trembled. You picture a place you've never been, but feel certain you've seen. The The mind isn't just recalling, it's perceiving on its own terms. And that challenges everything we believe about reality. If you can see what's not there, what does there even mean? This brings us closer to the question of what awareness truly is. Is it tied to the senses, or is it the container they pour into? Is vision the act of seeing, or the recognition of what is seen? And when the physical world goes dark and the thoughts go quiet, what image lingers behind it all? Let's ask gently, what have you seen with your inner eye that your outer eyes never could efface, that no longer exists? A future that hasn't happened, a dream that felt more real than yesterday. Don't explain it. Just remember. And here's the symbol that stays: a woman sitting cross-legged in a dimly lit room, her eyes closed. On the wall behind her, a painting slowly takes shape, not with brushes, but with light. Colors bloom across the canvas. Shapes move. A story unfolds. She's not watching it. She's creating it. But she doesn't know how. She just feels. And the image becomes real. There is a seeing that doesn't come from the eyes. A knowing that doesn't pass through words. You felt it before when you walked into a room and instantly sensed the tension when you met someone and knew without reason that you were safe or unsafe. This isn't intuition in the mystical sense. It's something deeper, quieter, a kind of inner compass that doesn't shout. It only nudges. This is the soul's eye, the part of you that doesn't just see the world, it feels its truth. Alfred Adler believed we are motivated not by the past, but by the future, by where we want to go, not where we've been. Every behavior, every choice, even every emotion was to him an attempt to move toward a perceived ideal. Not always consciously, but always with a purpose. The child who becomes overly helpful may unconsciously seek connection. The perfectionist might be trying to earn love. And all of it, he said, is guided by a fictional final goal, a private sense of what completion looks like. But what guides that sense? What watches the watcher? Carl Jung might answer the self. Not the ego, the part of you that says, I am this, I am that, but the self with a capital S, the organizing center of the psyche, the whole of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow. And it's this self, he said, that sees through the soul's eye. It's what gives you those moments of inner recognition, when a decision feels right in your bones, when a piece of art makes you cry and you don't know why, when you meet someone and feel like you've known them forever. It's not logic, it's alignment, a glimpse into a truth larger than your story. But this eye doesn't work like your mind. It doesn't analyze, it doesn't compare, it doesn't explain, it simply sees. And that's the paradox. The more you try to understand it with your thoughts, the farther away it feels. The soul's eye doesn't need to understand. It already knows, but the knowing is quiet. And most of the time, we're too loud to hear it. Think of how often you override this inner knowing. You choose what's practical, expected, reasonable. You suppress the truth rising in your chest because it doesn't fit the timeline. You stay in a job that deadens you. You say yes when you want to run. You force a smile when your body wants to scream. And every time you do, the soul's eye dims a little, not because it's broken, but because it's been pushed aside, ignored, covered with the dust of performance, but it never leaves. And the beauty is, it doesn't hold a grudge. The moment you slow down, the moment you ask not, what should I do, but what feels true, it returns. Not always with clarity, but always with honesty. Sometimes the truth it shows is uncomfortable. You see that you've outgrown a version of yourself. You see that a relationship you've been clinging to is built on fear, not love. You see that the story you've told for years about who you are and what you want was written by someone else. And now the soul's eye invites you to look again. This is why Adler and Jung, though different in many ways, both understood that healing is not just about insight. It's about orientation. Not why did this happen to me, but where am I going now? What future is pulling me forward? What part of me already sees the next step? even if I'm afraid to take it. So let's ask softly, what truth have you glimpsed lately, however faint that your mind keeps trying to dismiss? Not what's logical, not what's expected, but what feels real, even if it scares you. And the image that stays is this: a forest path at dusk, the air still, the light dim. You've been walking for hours, unsure of the direction. The map in your hand is smudged unreadable. But then just as you start to doubt, something inside your chest pulses, a sensation faint but steady. You put the map away. You turn your head not toward the clearest trail, but toward the quietest one. And you step forward, not because you know, but because something in you already sees. Sometimes to understand who you are, you have to break that understanding completely. Let it fall apart. Let the mind bend until it cracks open, revealing the empty space beneath all assumptions. That's what thought experiments do, not to give answers, but to peel back the illusions. Like a whisper that asks, what if everything you believe about the self is just convenient fiction? Start with the ship of Theseus. Imagine a wooden ship. Over time, each plank is replaced slowly, one by one, until not a single original piece remains. Is it still the same ship? Now imagine that all the original pieces are gathered and rebuilt elsewhere. Which ship is you? The one that grew and changed, or the one that stayed true to its parts? You begin to feel the weight of the question. If every cell in your body is replaced every few years, are you still the same person you were at 5, at 15, at 25? If not, then who exactly are you protecting with every decision? Now consider the Chinese room, a thought experiment from philosopher John Searle. Imagine a person locked in a room. They don't understand Chinese, but they have a rule book. When given a sentence in Chinese, they look up the symbols, follow instructions, and return a response in perfect Chinese. To the outsider, it looks like the person understands, but inside there is no comprehension. Just syntax, just patterns. This is the riddle of artificial intelligence, but it's also the riddle of you. If your brain is following patterns, neurons firing, chemicals shifting, does that mean you truly understand anything? Or are you just responding according to rules you can't even see? And then there's the strange world of split brain experiments. In patients whose brain hemispheres were surgically separated, scientists observed something startling. When one side of the brain was shown an image, the other side responsible for speech couldn't describe it, but the body still reacted, as if there were two selves coexisting, one that could speak and one that could know. If your brain can be divided and still function with separate awarenesses, then where is the real you? The paradox builds. You think of yourself as a continuous identity, a core, a soul. But every theory, every experiment whispers that the self may be a process, not a thing. A story told in real time. A chorus of functions giving the illusion of unity. Like a symphony without a conductor. Still playing. Still beautiful. Carl Jung, aware of these paradoxes, never tried to define the self too tightly. He spoke instead of the self as a symbol of wholeness, not a fixed thing, but a totality that includes contradictions, the conscious and unconscious, the seen and the unseen, the light and the shadow. You are not one self, but many voices in conversation, and the you think of is just the narrator, not the author. This realization can feel disorienting. You want to believe in a solid center, something eternal, something knowable. But maybe the soul isn't an object. Maybe it's a field, a space where experience unfolds. And maybe you don't need to be a thing to be real. Maybe it's enough to be aware. So here's the question that quietly breaks the frame. If everything you believe about yourself were taken away, your memories, your body, your preferences, what would still be there to notice their absence? You might never answer it. That's okay. Some questions aren't puzzles, they're mirrors. They reflect the mystery back to you. And here's the image that stays: a library filled with mirrors instead of books. Each mirror shows a different version of you, laughing, crying, growing older, vanishing. You walk through the aisles, seeing them all. None of them are lies, but none of them are whole. At the far end of the room, there's one mirror without a reflection. You stand before it, and in the stillness, for the first time, you feel yourself. You think you've reached the center. You peel back a layer of thought, of self, of identity, and there beneath it is something deeper. You touch it, you breathe into it, and just as you start to settle, the ground shifts again. Another layer, another question, another realization that what you thought was you was only a shadow of something even quieter. This is the nature of self-inquiry, of consciousness looking at itself. It's not a straight line, it's a spiral, one that never quite closes, one that bends inward forever. You notice it in the way your reflections change, how something that once felt true now feels small, how the certainty you clung to last year has unraveled into something softer, more complex. This isn't regression. This is the spiral in motion. Growth that circles back on itself, not to repeat, but to remember, to deepen. And here's the paradox. Every answer you find opens a new door. Every clarity births new ambiguity. Awareness doesn't settle. It expands. And the more you know, the more you become aware of what you don't know. Like walking with a lantern through a forest, the circle of light grows, but so does your awareness of the darkness surrounding it. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, a lifelong unfolding of the self. Not arriving at a destination, but circling closer and closer to your center. A center that may not even be a point. It may be motion itself. And this is where logic falters, where language stumbles, because awareness can observe awareness, and in doing so doubles back on itself like an infinite mirror. You ask, who am I? And part of you answers. But then you ask who is asking, and suddenly the answer dissolves. This isn't a flaw in consciousness. It is consciousness. Recursive, self-referential, alive, like a thought that thinks about thinking, a spiral that cannot end because its nature is to move. Sometimes this movement is painful. You want rest, closure, to finally know who you are and be done with it. But you're not a problem to solve. You're a mystery to live. And the spiral is your nature, not to escape it, but to surrender to its rhythm. To trust that every time you return to a familiar place, you do so with new eyes, a new voice, a deeper breath. Consider the spiral in nature. Galaxies spin DNA coils. Shells curve into golden ratios. The very structure of life is built on return on cycles, loops, orbits. Why should consciousness be any different? You are not broken for looping. You are not lost for asking the same question again. You are alive. And that's what life does, it circles. Not aimlessly, but faithfully. Adler might say the spiral reflects your striving, the way each turn reflects a deeper longing for wholeness, for meaning. And each loop offers new perspective. You're not who you were on the last rotation. Even if it feels the same, you've changed. You've seen more, held more, released more. So here's the soft question to rest in what question keeps returning to you. Not because you haven't answered it, but because it's asking to be lived at a deeper level. Don't rush to answer. Just notice what rises. And here's the image that stays, a staircase spiraling down into a quiet cave, each step lit by a single candle. You descend slowly, not afraid, not searching, just present. The air cools, the silence deepens, and though you've passed this way before, you feel something new. A heartbeat beneath the stone, a warmth behind the walls. You keep walking, not to reach the end, but to remember that the spiral is the destination. You look up at the stars and feel something stir, not just awe, familiarity, as if part of you remembers, as if the space out there reflects something inside here. You trace constellations, feel the vast silence between galaxies, and wonder not just where you are in the universe, but what you are in the universe. And then gently the paradox arrives. What if the universe isn't just something you're in, but something looking at itself through you? This is not metaphor. It's a question that has haunted physicists, mystics, and poets alike. The atoms that make up your body were forged in stars. The iron in your blood was once the heart of a supernova. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are its expression. And yet, you're also the only part of it, so far as we know, that asks, why am I here? The universe, vast and silent, gave rise to life. And life, fragile and temporary, gave rise to mind. And mind gave rise to awareness. And now awareness looks back at the universe and says, I see you. So which came first, the observer or the observed? Or are they the same thing folded in on themselves like a Mobius strip, one surface, no beginning, no end? Carl Jung believed in what he called the unus mundus, the one world, a reality where inner and outer are not divided, where psyche and matter reflect one another. Synchronicity to Jung wasn't just coincidence. It was evidence that what we see and what we are might not be two different things. Imagine this: a wave rises from the ocean. It crests, it travels, it dissolves. For a moment, the wave believes it's separate. It has form, it has motion, it has a name, but it is never anything but the ocean in motion. You are the wave. You are the motion. You are the awareness of the ocean in form. And this is where the soul's eye opens even wider, because the idea of separateness begins to dissolve. The trees you walk past, the air you breathe, the people you love, none of it is out there. It's all part of the same unfolding, the same field of awareness playing itself into infinite variations. And you, this small, singular person, are a node in that field, a nerve ending of the cosmos, feeling, reflecting, asking. Adler might say that this impulse to understand your place, to find meaning, is not weakness but direction. That purpose is not something you find, but something you are, a trajectory, a becoming. And if the universe does see through you, then perhaps your existence isn't an accident. Perhaps it's a question the cosmos wanted to ask, out loud. Still, the mind rebels. It wants boundaries. It wants names. I am here. The stars are there. But awareness doesn't respect those lines. It bleeds. It bridges. It whispers that every breath you take is shared with trees, that every thought you think ripples across others in ways you'll never fully see. That consciousness might be less like a possession and more like a network, a light passed from eye to eye. So here's the question that floats beyond language. What if the universe dreamed itself into being? And you are the part of that dream that woke up, not to be special, but to be aware, to see, to reflect. And here's the image that stays: a person standing on a hill at night, surrounded by stars, not just looking at the sky, but being looked at by it. The wind moves through them as if through grass. Their eyes shine not with answers, but with the quiet ache of recognition, of remembering, of realizing that awareness isn't something they hold. It's something they are. At some point in your search, in the asking, the turning inward, the circling spiral of self-inquiry, you stop needing answers, not because you found them, but because something quieter took their place. Silence, not the absence of noise, but a presence beneath it. A stillness that doesn't wait to speak. A silence that listens. And you begin to notice all your thoughts, your identities, your memories. They rise from the silence and fall back into it, like waves returning to the ocean. The deeper you sit in that awareness, the more the noise begins to soften. Not because you force it, but because you no longer need it to define you. There's a strange paradox here. You've spent your whole life thinking that your thoughts are you, that the voice narrating your every move is the source of your truth. But when you rest in this silence, this space behind the voice, you realize something revolutionary. You are not your thoughts. You are what hears them. And what hears them doesn't speak. This silence is not emptiness. It's fullness without form. The same space you touch in deep meditation, or in awe, or in grief too big for words. The same space you feel after a storm when the world holds its breath. The same silence between notes in music, the pause that makes the sound meaningful. It is not nothing. It is the everything that thought floats within. Carl Jung spoke of the self as the totality of all that you are conscious and unconscious. But even that totality exists within something larger, something wordless. What if this silence isn't just a condition of the mind, but the condition of reality itself? What if all that you've built, all that you've struggled to name, is a surface ripple, and the silence beneath it is what's real? When you stop trying to be someone, when you stop chasing identity and simply rest, this silence opens. It holds everything you've ever been without resistance. The angry you, the tired you, the dreaming you, the small child and the adult. All of them fall gently into the quiet. And the quiet holds them like a mother who's not trying to teach you anything, just to be there. This is not a silence you achieve. It's a silence you return to. It's always been there beneath the panic, beneath the pride, beneath the performing. You catch glimpses of it when you're watching snow fall, or when you stare into someone's eyes long enough for language to dissolve. It's not dramatic. It's not profound. It just is. And perhaps this is what Jung Adler and even Gabor Mate are all circling toward in their own ways, that healing is not about becoming more. It's about needing less, letting go of the compulsion to define, to defend, to be right, to be good, to be known, and instead, to be here, in this breath, in this quiet, where awareness rests not on identity, but on being. So here's the last question before we close. Who are you? When there is nothing left to fix, to prove, or to say, not in theory, in experience. What part of you survives when the story ends? What remains when you are no longer performing for the world or for yourself? The mind may flinch at this emptiness, but the soul exhales, because in that emptiness you are finally not separate, not above or below, not before or after, just part of it all. Just this. And the image that stays a vast black sky, no stars, no moon, just stillness. You lie on your back, eyes open, breath soft, and for the first time you stop reaching. You don't need a meaning. You don't need a name. You don't need anything, because you've come home to the silence that was never empty, the silence that was always you. Maybe consciousness isn't something you have. Maybe it's something you are. Not a trait, not a skill, not even a mystery to solve, but a doorway you walk through each moment you stop trying to be someone. All this time you've been chasing awareness like a firefly in the dark, thinking if you could just hold it still, understand it, name it, you'd finally feel whole. But maybe the truth is quieter. Maybe awareness doesn't live inside you. Maybe you live inside it. A current of being flowing through all things, choosing for a while to take the shape of your body, your story, your breath. And when the breath slows, when the stories end, that awareness doesn't disappear. It returns. It dissolves. It watches. Still. You followed a long spiral tonight through ego, inner child, mirror cosmos, memory, and dream. And if you feel a little more still, a little more spacious, that's not by accident. It's not that you learned something new. It's that you remembered what you already knew before the noise began, before the name, before the thought. That behind everything, you are still there, watching, always. So rest here. Let go of the need to define or even to understand. Just breathe. The awareness is already holding you. You don't have to try. You never did. End of script. Drift gently and I'll meet you in the next thought.